I was a professional soccer player, and I was a presenter for the BBC, and then became a national speaker for the British Green Party. And then I had some amazing experiences, what you might term spiritual experiences. But anyway, experiences that were not the usual experiences that people have, and it basically lifted the veil from my eyes, and I started to see the world in a different, completely different way. And I started in an incredibly synchronistic journey, where I would come across information, people, situations, experiences in an extraordinarily coordinated way that was putting information in front of my face. And what I started to do was to connect the dots. And there are many, many things going on in the world, many different, quote, conspiracies, many manipulations, many engineered events, and many engineered forms of control, whether it's control of finance or control of the media, whatever. But when you connect the dots, you realize that all roads lead to a network of interbreeding families that go back to the ancient world, who call themselves the Illuminati.
Now, tell us a little bit
the whole picture started to unfold, and I've been doing it now for 15 years full time, and you know the picture is really starting to become clear. Not least because the agenda of the Illuminati, which is a global Orwellian state, is of course in front of our eyes more and more with every passing day now.
Right, and as
that the greatest form of control actually is not an overt dictatorship like fascism or communism. That is a very efficient form of control for a while, but it has a major flaw, which is that the people being controlled know they're controlled. And when you know that you are controlled and who the controllers are, then you've got a chance of doing something about it. And eventually the desire for freedom will bring situations like that to an end at some point. It might take some time, but it will happen. The greatest form of control is the illusion that we're free. And that's the kind of control that they've created in what we call the democratic world. It is a few controlling events while giving the impression to the people that they are free. Now, what is this freedom? This freedom is putting a cross on a piece of paper once every 4 or 5 years, or in America, pressing some button on some electronic computer system which anyone can decide how you're going to vote. And we call that freedom. You know, people do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. You know, it's what I call in the books the prison without the bars. You know, you sit in a cell with bars around you. You know you're in a cell, but if you sit in a cell and you can't see the bars, and you think you can get up and go where you like whenever you choose. And what is happening now, Alex, and the reason that so many more people are waking up, and it had to be like this. People, you know, weren't going to wake up until more and more this Orwellian centralized fascist state was actually increasingly in our face. And what's beginning to happen as a result of all these things, changes in legislation since 9/11, which have taken away basic freedoms, imposed more and more control, more and more military involvement in law enforcement, etc., is basically we're beginning to see the bars now. And as we do, people are more and more, in ever more vast numbers, open to the fact that what people like me and others have been talking about all these years is actually reality. What people are actually saying, hey, you know, these terrorists, they're threatening our freedom. So what we have to do to meet the threat is to take our freedoms away. You know, I mean, excuse me, I mean, that's mental gymnastics on a universal scale. But there are two types of people. There are those who are genuinely so completely indoctrinated that they genuinely believe that people like Bush care about their freedom, and that you know, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians in Iraq is somehow bringing peace and love to the world. And there are those other people, which you quite rightly identify, who are basically in serious denial, because it's a collective version of when people say, "Oh, change the subject. Don't want to talk about it." Okay. In other words, they don't want to face what they instinctively know is going on, because it's just too much for them. See, the other thing is you find with journalists, and you find with people in the military, I've met. Another aspect of this is that to accept that even the basis of what people like me are saying is true, is to accept as a journalist that they have been duped all their careers and have actually contributed to the very agenda that we're talking about.
Right.
People in the military, I know someone who's retired military, and he's in complete denial for this, and one of the key reasons for that is that he will have to accept that throughout his military career he was serving a very different master to the one he believed he was, and a master with a very different agenda to the one he thought he was serving. So these are all mental and emotional situations that cause people to go into denial.
David, we're going to go to a real quick clip of the Illuminati just to see some of the things that you elaborate on. When we come back, we're going to get into the solution with David Icke. Keep it right here on Outside.
A major U.S. Daily story about subliminal messages. I don't think we need to be subliminal.
Television is a massive mass hypnotist to the global mind. And what happens is it is implanting a belief in reality by the minute, and then once we take on that belief implanted, when information enters the eyes, we edit it on the basis of that belief. And so what the global population is subjecting, or it's subjected to, suffering from, is actually literally mass hypnosis. And when we talk about people who kind of start to see things and see the manipulation they couldn't see before, what do we say about them? What do they say about themselves? They say, I woke up. Exactly what they've done. When people start to go, hey, I can see it now, it's like someone has gone along, like the hypnotist, and clicked their fingers, and it's like, oh, I can see it now. Mass hypnosis. And that is the greatest hypnotist on the planet, and that's the basis of why it was created.
A 49-year-old unidentified man went berserk last night.
Where does she get her view of the world?
Shotgun. 14 people are dead, including 3
Who will be her
children.
role models?
Never been a better time to buy.
What values will she have? Whose child is she? Yours or the network's? Take back your children. Turn off the TV.
And when you start to research the subliminals in advertising and television, what staggers you is not what they do and what's there, but the scale of it. I mean, it's like our consciousness is being hit by an explosion of this stuff. Because you see, this is another interesting point. Experiments have shown that about 1.5 seconds before the conscious mind decides to take action, move its arms or whatever, speak, 1.5 seconds before it consciously decides to do that, the electrical signals have begun in the brain to do it. For me, the conscious level is the experiencer and observer of reality, but the subconscious is the creator of it, the generator of it. And this is why the Illuminati want the subconscious mind through subliminals. What does subliminal mean? It means below threshold. It's below the threshold the conscious mind picks up, but the subconscious mind picks everything up like a sponge. And therefore they are planting these thoughts into the subconscious, which then filter down into the conscious, and we think we're having our own thoughts, when actually they're planted thoughts done at a subliminal level.
The whole Illuminati manipulation is based on divide and rule. It's based on getting people into a perception of sides and then bringing the sides into conflict. This is how they engineer wars. This is how they're engineering the war on terror. They're creating two sides, the free world and the terrorists in the public mind, and they are seeking to bring those two polarities into conflict because a few can only control the many if the many are divided and at war with themselves, and also if the many are manipulated to control each other. What I have done in my journey is I started off, and still do, but certainly in the first years, focusing on what I call the five sense manipulation, the manipulation of wars, of the banking system, of politics, etc. And then I started to realize that behind the, if you like, the human level of the Illuminati that we see, are other forces that are not actually of this world, who operate in dimensions of reality very close to this one, but can move into this one and out of this one, because the way that people are controlled to a vast extent is by limiting the information that they receive. We can only perceive possibility on the basis, overwhelmingly, of the information we have of what's possible. For instance, a few centuries ago, when people said the Earth was round for the first time, the population and the experts said that's ridiculous, it's impossible, because the people on the bottom would fall off. Now, that made sense on the limited knowledge that they were given. Once you introduce the law of gravity, however, what appeared to be ludicrous and bizarre starts to take on a very logical picture. And what they're doing symbolically all the time is keeping the law of gravity from us. In other words, information that would allow us to see the true nature of reality and the infinite nature of possibility. And so when you talk about the world being manipulated from other realms, other dimensions of existence, people go, it's impossible, you know, no. But what is kept from us is just how little we can see. We are actually virtually blind in terms of what we can see. Of what is projected by mainstream science to exist in this universe in terms of matter, mass, and what have you, the electromagnetic spectrum is around 0.005% of what is projected to exist in this universe. What humans can actually see, what they call visible light, is a fraction of that 0.005%. In other words, when we look through our eyes, we are not seeing everything that exists in that space as we instinctively think.
Right.
We are seeing a tiny, tiny frequency range that our five senses and sight can access. And just beyond that frequency range that we can see is infinity, and entities that are manipulating us. Now, what happened then, and this is where the new book came in, Infinite Love is the Only Truth, Everything Else is Illusion, was that over the last year, I've gone to the next stage, which is, okay, we have these different dimensions of reality, and we're like transistor radios. At any point, we're tuned to a particular station, i.e. at the moment, we're tuned to this so-called physical reality, and therefore that's what we see. But there are other infinite radio stations that we can also access. And the next stage was to understand that actually this reality that we think is real and solid is actually an illusion. And when you start to realize that the physical body is also just a holographic illusion, the idea of racism is just insane. What is happening is that this knowledge of the true nature of reality is being kept from us, and the whole emphasis of society and the way it's structured and the way that we are enticed is focused on the five senses. It's about keeping us in this five-sense reality, this tiny frequency range called visible light, and convincing us from cradle to grave that this is all there is. And things around us, for instance, are solid, and we live in this solid world. But it's impossible. I mean, I'm looking at a so-called solid wall now, which only exists, like the rest of the reality I'm looking at, apparently around me. It only exists in my head in the form that I'm looking at. We live in what I call a holographic internet. We are tuned in to this collective reality, which only exists as we appear to see it as solid objects and what have you. In our heads. Now, this is not me smoking some weed in some darkened room. This is increasingly mainstream science. All that happens when the five senses are activated is they pass electrical signals to the brain, which then decodes them into the apparently physical solid world we see around us. And so if you look at the Internet, the only place the Internet exists as we perceive the Internet, in websites and graphics and words, is actually on the computer screen. Everywhere else, the Internet is electronic circuits and mathematical codes. It's the same with television. Television doesn't, episodes of Friends and the 10 o'clock news don't come flying over the trees to our house. You look out the window, you don't see them. No, but when the television's switched on, it starts decoding frequency broadcasts into pictures, and the only place that television exists as we perceive television is on television screen. Everywhere else, it is frequency broadcasts and electronic circuits. And the more that I've understood this, and I go into this in detail in the new book, we live in a holographic Internet, and what tunes us into this collective reality is the DNA, which is a receiver-transmitter of information, and this is where the collective reality comes from.
Now, David,
if you can manipulate that, you can get people to decode reality in a way that suits your agenda, and you can get them to believe that the physical body is who they are, when it is just an illusory hologram, which is just there to allow consciousness to experience this reality. And so whether it's black or yellow or blue with pink spots, it's just a holographic illusion. And but if you can get people to buy the five-sense world as the only world there is, to buy the fact that who I am is David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, instead of infinite consciousness, which we all are, then you can start to create the sides and the polarities, black against white, Jew against Christian, that create the divide and rule. What has happened with me in this journey I've been on is, like I said earlier, I've been through these different levels of it, and the level that I'm at now and moving on with, for me, encapsulates the level we need to view this from if we're going to make a difference, because what we call the Matrix, which is an illusory world very, very much like that portrayed in the Matrix movies, it depends for its existence on polarity, because it's the world of vibration. And for something to vibrate, it needs to oscillate between two polarities. So this is the world of polarity, the world of vibration, this realm that we think is real, but is actually an illusion that exists only in our heads. And so understanding the nature of the reality we're experiencing is fundamental to changing it. You see, if we are convinced that this physical world is, quote, real, and this is the only level that you can change anything, then we're going to run around like headless chickens, expending our energy and our frustration, trying to change something that, in effect, it's like having a movie projected on a screen, and you try to change the movie by changing what's on the screen at the level of the screen itself. You can't do that. If you want to change the movie, you've got to go to the back of the theater and change what's being projected. And so this world we think is around us is actually a projection. And we need to change the nature of the projection.
Now,
and
how do we change that,
to
David?
getting caught in this.
David, now let's talk specifically. How do we change that? And what I'm getting at is, let's talk about creative visualization, how we can recreate our planet in a better, more productive environment.
Well, for me, the fundamental point is to identify who we are from the point of view of who we are, and not this illusory personality that we actually identify with. And I'll give some explanation to that. This whole area of research that I'm into now, and is detailed in the new book, came about when a friend of mine, who's a cutting-edge healer, just said to me that he had written a paper years and years ago about DNA, which, as findings have shown, was well ahead of its time. And he said two things. He said that the DNA is a crystalline substance that is a receiver-transmitter of information. And secondly, that every single form of life has the same 4 DNA codes, A, C, G, and T. And the difference between a house mouse and a human body is the sequence that these codes are in. Now, what I've also, what I began to understand then is as I mentioned earlier, what tunes us into this matrix, what tunes us into the radio station of this illusory world, which we then think is real, is the DNA. It's like an antennae. And we start to identify then with the physical body and who we are, with the nature of the personality of the person we are. And the more I've understood this, even what we call thought and emotion are manifestations of the DNA. It's like a computer program. And it's funny that when I'd finished this book and it went off to be designed into book form, I came across an article, in fact a number of them, about a research project by Russian scientists who were set out with a series of experts in various disciplines to try to establish, and if you haven't come across this, wait for this, what the 90+% of DNA that science calls junk DNA, because it doesn't know what it does. People think, oh, yeah, science knows what DNA is. No, it doesn't.
Right, science knows it all.
It calls 90% of it junk DNA because it doesn't know what it does. And this research project was to try to find out what that 90% actually did. And what it concluded was that the DNA, and therefore the physical body as we perceive it, is actually a biological computer. It's a biological internet, if you like. And the reason that psychologists say they can identify or break down human personalities into about 12 archetypal personalities and combinations of them is because what they're identifying is not consciousness in the highest sense, but these computer programs that we identify with. So what I'm saying here, and if you look at any of the ancient cultures, you'll hear the same basic theme. We are not our thoughts. We are not even our emotions. They are products of this biological computer program. We are the silence between the thoughts. We are that place that people go in meditation, where the place where people go when they daydream, where their mind, the computer software chatterbox mind shuts up, and you go into the silence. Now, the reason that wherever you go, they talk about, I've got a great friend, Credo Mutwa, who's a Zulu shaman and the official historian of the Zulu nation, and he talks about going to the silent cave, the place of silence, where he says past, present, and future all meet at the same point. And it's a recurring theme, and the reason that it's silent, this infinite consciousness beyond the illusion, is because it's all-knowing. It doesn't have to have this constant chatterbox trying to work things out because it just knows. And we access that silence, that infinite consciousness beyond this illusory madness through our intuitive knowing, not through thought, through our intuitive knowing. Now, I know from my own experience and talking to goodness knows how many other people who've had the same experience around the world, once you move from a point of perceiving this world from the level of thought and emotion, and you go into that silence of all-knowing, you are in the world physically, yes, but you are not of it. And you start to see what you couldn't see before. Instead of being in the fog and caught in the fog and taking this reality to be, quote, real, you start to see the manipulations. You start to intuitively know that people are lying to you. You intuitively know that this explanation for 9/11 or the London bombings is a total fraud and fake. That is the place that we need to get so that we see through it without reading any of my books, without listening to radio shows like this, great as they are. You intuitively know it because you're accessing that level of all-knowing. Now, at the top level of the Illuminati, where this knowledge has been passed over through the secret society network at the highest level, only to people they want to have the knowledge, they know how this reality is created and the nature of this reality. And what they want to do, and what they've done, is structure society to hold us in the level of mind, thought, in the level of emotion, in the level of the five senses, so we don't access that infinite, all-knowing, all-loving level of consciousness that manifests itself in the silence. And when you get deeper and deeper into this, as I do in the new book, you start to realize that this assault on us through chemical additives in food, chemical additives in water, through electromagnetic frequencies, mobile phone frequencies, all these things, they have a single recurring common theme. They rewire the electrical circuitry of the brain, and they affect the DNA.
David.
And the idea is to hold us through all these different means in the five-sense level of reality, so we do not access that which we really are, which is the infinite consciousness between the thoughts and between the emotions. And when you get to that level, you don't need to be told what's going on in the world. You can see it because you are symbolically looking into the world instead of being caught in it and believing it to be real. And once we do that, then everything changes. And that's why they're desperate to keep us in the five-sense reality. And the whole of society is structured to entice and attract the five senses.
If what they tell us about who we are is not true, it's not necessarily easy inside the box definition, the reality consciousness of who we are, because to me it's like trying to describe, well, as far as Buddhism's concerned, describe enlightenment. Well, it's not really something you can describe with simple English in the box words in a holographic universe. It's something you feel, it's something you know. And when you have it and when you're at that point, when you're at one with the source, it's beyond words.
Exactly, and human words are so limited, and in many ways they're supposed to be limited. And Orwell talked in his books about, particularly 1984, about newspeak, where you replace words with new words which have less and less specific meaning, become bland and manifest themselves in what we call today political correctness.
Right.
And as he said, in this world, we think in words. When you have a thought, and this is actually an interesting point in relation to what I said a few minutes ago. We think in thought. We think in words, rather. And therefore, if you reduce, as Orwell pointed out, the number of words available and the specific nature of what they're describing, then you not only make it more and more difficult for people to articulate what they feel and what they know,
right,
you actually make it more difficult for them even to think what they know, because or think about the world as they perceive it, because they have not got, as generation follows generation, the language to even think in those terms. But if you go beyond thought into the realm of silence, into the realm of knowing, then you don't need words. I mean, you don't even know. I mean, you'll know this, Alex, and many people listening to this program will know it, and you really have to experience it to know it. You get to a state of knowing, and there are no words. You don't need them. You just know something. You don't need words to describe what you know. You just know it.
Without bringing religion into it. But I've read your last book, and there were some things I didn't quite understand. Do you see there being something that we can look up to that's not per se above us being low down here, but spirit guides, an almighty that's not a specific name, a specific religion, but a consciousness that we're connected to, being the source, that can guide us, being the term, thy will, not mine, be done?
Yeah, for me, I think one of the words I would support being eradicated from the human language is the word worship. You know, all the time we are pressured and encouraged to look up at something. You know, I mean, we are that consciousness. We are that infinite consciousness. Everything is that infinite consciousness expressing itself in different ways. What has happened, it's not that we have to get anywhere. We don't have to evolve to enlightenment. We are enlightened. We are infinite consciousness. We are the all-knowing. We're different expressions of it. What's happened in this illusory, quote, matrix world is that we have been manipulated to disconnect from that consciousness in terms of understanding that that's what we are. And what we believe is what we create. And psychological experiments have shown this, how what happens is information is received by the brain, the DNA, whatever you want to describe it. And what happens is, on the basis of our belief in reality, we edit that information and filter that information to fit what our indoctrinated belief. What stage hypnotists are doing is what the Illuminati are doing collectively to the human race. They are implanting a false reality which the stooges on the stage then decode into their experienced reality, which is what we're doing all the time. So when someone is given a potato and they're told to eat it, and they're told by the hypnotist that they are eating an apple, what happens is, to them, they're eating an apple. Why? Because the implanted belief that they're eating an apple decodes the electrical signals coming from the taste cells to the brain, not into a potato, which is what they're actually eating, but into an apple. It just codes the way that signal is interpreted. Mm-hmm. And I tell a story in the book, which was told by a guy called Michael Talbot in a wonderful book in the early 90s called The Holographic Universe, in which a stage hypnotist, which he experienced, was brought to a party that he was attended. And one guy called Tom, when the hypnotist was about to bring him out of his trance state, he said to Tom, when I bring you out of the trance state, you're not going to be able to see your daughter. And what he did then, the hypnotist, is he put the daughter right in front of Tom, who was sitting down. So he's looking into his daughter's belly. When he brings him apparently out of the trance state, he says to Tom, can you see your daughter in the room? He can't see his daughter. She starts giggling, but he can't hear her. The hypnotist then went behind the daughter and put his hand in the small of her back and said to Tom, what am I holding? And Tom looked bemused because it was obvious to him. He said, you're holding a watch. He said, there's an inscription on the watch. Can you read it? He read the inscription. Between him and the watch was his daughter. And people would say, that's fantastic, that's impossible, but it's not. Because this world we think is around us only exists in our head as a holographic illusion decoded from the electrical signals, etc., that the brain receives, we can edit that reality. And therefore, when the implanted belief was put in, your daughter's not in the room, what happens is that those frequency fields that represent his daughter are simply edited out by Tom's brain, and David see them.
Right.
Now, what is happening, Alex, and this is so important, is the Illuminati have created a situation in which the human race is in a hypnotic state because from cradle to grave we are implanted with a belief in reality through the education system and the media and all this other stuff and what we bravely call science. And therefore, the human race is constantly decoding reality based on the belief in what is real. And when you start to change these indoctrinated beliefs, the way you decode reality changes, and you start to see beyond the illusion. And this is the way that we're going to get out of this, not by rushing around in the illusion trying to change it.
Right.
We need to change the way we interpret reality, and therefore reality will change. And this is the knowledge that they don't want us to have because it's the way out of here. When you go into the silence, there is no fear. There is no fear at that level of infinite consciousness in awareness that it's infinite consciousness. The fear is a manifestation of the illusion. And fear is the four-letter word that controls the world. It's fear that's being manipulated now over the war on terror and stuff like that, the war of conquest, or war by terror, actually. It's all part of the control mechanism, because once you get people in fear, they come massively into the five-sense level of reality, because fear is a manifestation of the five-sense reality. It's one of the key emotional prisons within the biological computer program, if you like, the software we call the body, which holds us in to this five-sense reality. And so what they're trying to do all the time is keep us in a state of fear. And they're obviously very successful at it. And what I would say to people is I don't want to use words like meditation. I don't meditate. I just sit quietly and daydream and go into these states. But if you do sit quietly, don't try to stop thinking, because that will just make you think more and make you think about not thinking. But just relax and
you're right.
Go into a place of silence. And what will happen is eventually, the more you do it, you'll start to hear your thoughts and feel your emotions, but you'll realize that they're not you. It's like watching a television program, or more accurately, listening to a radio show. Mm-hmm. The thoughts go past, and the emotions go past, and you start to realize from this point of silence that you've reached that, hey,
right,
then I'm not my thoughts. Where are those thoughts being generated from? They're not me. Where are these emotions coming from? They're not me. And at that point, you start to realize that very powerfully from your own experience, that what you've been controlled by all your life, which is thought and emotion, which is the absolute controllers of human behavior. When you get into the silence beyond thought and emotion, you do get to a place of, and I've been there, I'm not saying I'm there all the time, I'm certainly not, but when I do get there, it's a place of bliss and joy and no fear that in your life up to that point, you just don't believe you could possibly experience. And it is quite a simple situation that we face. Those that are controlling us to control us and to harvest our energy, which is what they're doing, they need to hold us in the five-sense reality. They need to keep us in the realm of thought and emotion, and particularly emotion. That's the big one, the big controlling force, and keep us out of the silence. We don't need a solution. We need to remove the cause of the problem, and that's we're caught in this emotion, thought level of reality. And so we need to go beyond it into the silence of knowing, all knowing, and everything will change. And everything will change for a simple reason. For the same reason that Tom couldn't see his daughter because he changed his reality, that she wasn't in the room. Sure. We can change the reality that we experience by changing our belief in what is real. And when we get into the realm of silence, we get into the place of all-knowing, we get into the place of love in its true sense and its infinite sense, then the reality that manifests will reflect that level of knowing, of being, of love, and this prison world of manipulation and control.